Yep, I've knocked it on the floor. That's one thing about the way I work, because I'm so good at dropping everything, at least I know the gravity's always working. Right. Now we're in a better place to commence this little routine. Now, while there's still a lot of excess grease lurking about in there, I'm a firm believer in too much is never enough, so just going to put a thin layer of grease onto the bearings I've just popped in there. And that way I can be absolutely sure that it's lubricated. So that's the non-drive cone in place now. It's funny how with a dust seal on the other side I find it easier to put bearings in than a completely open side that I can see what I'm doing. Muscle memory has a lot to answer for, especially as I don't have a lot in the way of muscles. Don't have a lot in the way of memory. There's always an escape artist. Alright, let's try that again. You know what, I think it's still in that. Yep, there it is. So in goes the dust seal. Now, if all goes according to plan, yeah, the cone's still sat in the other side. The grease is effectively holding it in place. So as long as I'm careful now, this should, theoretically at least, wind through, and I'll flip it over, put the spacers on and the lock nut. If all that has gone according to plan, there'll be no play left in the axle. Now, the two washers that go on next, that one is what's called a top hat washer. I don't know whether you can quite make that out, but it has an outer edge and an inner edge. That goes against the cone. The slightly larger washer sits on the outside, and then the dear old lock nut goes on top of that. As for the grease that's sat in the end of the axle, I don't tend to worry about that, because when the quick release skewer goes back in, that will press up against that and hopefully provide a little bit of lubrication for the axle, skewer even. I know what I mean. And this is the point where, yeah, it always does it, you think you're doing up the lock nut, and what you're actually doing is unscrewing the cone, so that may have just put a little bit of play in it, but I can't feel any, so I think I'm going to smile happily and get the cassette back on next. Now, when fitting a cassette, if you look at your free hub body, which is this bit here, there's a wider gap between some of the teeth than there are others. And before I forget, because I always do, I'm going to put the rubber seal on the non-drive side. There you go. The one thing I almost always forget to do until the bike's gone out of the workshop, I have actually remembered to do. Who says miracles don't happen? That was almost easy. And on with the lock ring. Now, if I had the right size socket, I would do this up with a torque wrench to 40 Newton meters. Unfortunately, I don't have the right size socket, so I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, which is by hand and applying a certain amount of grunt. Okay, so that's the cassette back in position. And now it's just a matter of fitting the brake rotor and torquing up all the bolts that go with it. The standard torque setting for a brake rotor, brake disc, call it what you like, is 6.2 Newton meters. If you work in American money, I don't know what that is in inch pounds, sorry guys. This is what's known as a floating rotor because it's connected via a rivet to the braking surface is connected via a rivet to the rotor arms, or spider as it's also known. So that's just a case of line it up over the bolt holes and go to my collection of bolts that I've previously removed from this wheel. To begin with, you don't do them up tight, you just put them in until your fingers stop spinning and leave it there. And as you go round with the torque wrench, tell you what, that spanner is determined to live on the floor today. I'll have to have a chat with it later and explain, it's rather rude. It's either that or it's complaining because I haven't put it straight back in its toolbox, which would not surprise me in the least. Okay, so this is the final one, just going in loosely for now. Now, there is a pattern to doing up chainring bolts, rotor bolts. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or if you like, hit one, skip one. And there you have it. all 6 bolts correctly torqued. That can go back in my bicycle box. And finally the quick release. Obviously when I push this through now, it's not going to be set right for when it goes back into the bike, but it does mean I can get it to the bike without losing any of the springs or the nut or anything else, which is all too easy to do if you're not really paying enough attention. And there we go, one wheel rebuilt and spinning quite nicely. Lovely. Right, well that's it for today. Short, sweet, I know. Well, don't know about sweet, I was involved. And for the first time ever, not an angle grinder was used in the making of this wheel. Take care guys, see you soon.